You know, one thing I've enjoyed doing for a while is looking up some obscure retro anime OVAs from the 80s and 90s. There's a whole aesthetic to them that just makes them seem a lot more interesting than they usually end up being. Probably because it kind of feels like unearthing some hidden secret. Even though it's actually nothing like that, since you just go to MAL or something and look through the OVA section and then see if you can't find it with a simple Google search. But I digress. Today I want to talk about one such obscure OVA that I came across a while back. The synopsis for which made me realize that I had to drop everything I was doing and watch it right away. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be taking a look at the 1990s OVA, Heavy. So Heavy is a 52-minute long boxing movie that was released in 1990. It's based on a manga of the same name that was written and illustrated by Motoka Murakami. Heavy was produced by Studio Artland, the same studio that would later go on to make Mushishi, and it was directed by Noboru Ishiguro, who has also directed stuff like Legend of the Galactic Heroes and SDF Macross. Now that is nice and definitely helped put this show on my radar, but it's not what made me actually want to watch it pretty much right away after finding it. No, the thing that piqued my interest the most was the synopsis on MAL. Allow me to read it for you. Guy, a karate expert in the New York slums, is trained to be a boxing champion by a cancer-stricken doctor and a transvestite suffering from AIDS. The moment I read that, I knew that we had something special here. Now, obviously I wasn't expecting gold standard material from this movie. Yes, it has some nice names behind it, but the synopsis doesn't exactly tell us about any goals or what they are trying to accomplish with this story. So that, plus a fairly low rating, made me aware that this was probably not going to be great. But I was hoping that it was going to be at least fun. And in a way, it was. So the biggest issue of this movie is that it doesn't really ever go anywhere. Basically, we meet Guy, a guy who's learning karate from his father and is now entering the world of boxing in order to save up enough money to fund a life-saving operation for his father. By the way, no, his father is not deathly ill. He simply got shot in the head because he's an asshole and made a lot of enemies. So now an old doctor named Alex Gordon, who is suffering from cancer, is training Guy to become a boxing champion. Along this journey, they also seek out the help of a former boxer named Roman, who has now become a transvestite after quitting boxing because he has AIDS, and is very afraid that someone will come into contact with his spit, sweat, or blood and catch it. But that basically wraps up the story. 50 minutes is not a lot of time, and the movie doesn't really ever get going with anything. We only get a single fight against a boxer from Harlem before the movie ends. It's not very engaging, and while the problems that arise during this show are very real worries, like street violence, AIDS, and cancer, it's not like the movie does a great job at exploring these things. Although I will give it some credit given its short runtime for its handling of Roman's illness. Given the time this is set, Roman's struggles with AIDS is definitely very real. He can't box anymore because he might infect others. And when people learn of his illness, he is very often shunned, bullied, and thrown out, because people are afraid of him. Not gonna lie, that part actually took me by surprise. I was half expecting them to play the transvestite with AIDS thing up for a joke, so seeing them actually try to at least somewhat handle it maturely was a bit surprising. But still, that doesn't mean that the rest of the movie is amazing. It's just a bit of a good in an otherwise extremely mediocre movie. So let's talk about the bad then, shall we? For one, it's very hard to sympathize with Guy's father about getting shot. Mostly because he's an absolute asshole who goes around bullying others because he is a karate master and is very strong. So when he does eventually end up getting shot, it's also kinda just his own fault. So you never really feel for him. That sort of hurts Guy's main motivation for doing what he's doing, and the show likes to remind us of this. Like a certain flashback scene from when Guy was younger and he and his father came across two dogs. A mother and a puppy. The mother gets ran over by a truck, leaving the puppy by itself. Obviously, Guy's father does what we all would have done. Cook the mother as food so that he and Guy and the puppy can eat and live. All while telling his son that in this world it's survival of the fittest and only the strong survive. So yeah, not a very sympathetic man. Even if what he says does make sense, it's so out of nowhere that it's just hard to wrap your head around. As far as the cancer-stricken doctor is concerned, there isn't really much to say about him. He is dying and he just wants to do something big before he finally passes away. And after seeing how strong Guy is, as he saves some prostitute, he decides that he will make him a boxing champion. And that's about it. We see early on a picture of him with another boxer, so we can assume that he has an interest in boxing and probably has trained boxers in the past as well, but nothing really concrete. Just a dying old man wanting to achieve something first. Another fun scene we get towards the end of this movie is when Guy is fighting the Harlem boxer, whose name is Don Bailey. Being that he is from the meanest part of New York, he is obviously not what you would call a fair fighter. However, he does what he does to help out the poor people from Harlem, so technically he's a good guy. Something that Guy learns and sort of respects. But he is also trying to help his own asshole of a father, so he still beats the guy to a pulp and forces the referee to call the match. And it is then, in another moment of "do you feel bad yet?" that a young girl crawls out of her wheelchair, because of course she's in a wheelchair, and drags herself over to the knocked out boxer and calms the angry crowd by putting up all her money and telling them to bet on Don Bailey's next fight. Even though she knows that Guy has broken his jaw and that he will no longer be able to fight. And then she turns to Guy and tells him to become the lightweight world champion instead. Touching. Would have been more touching if we knew anything about these characters, but I guess it's something. But yeah, overall, this movie is just kind of average. It has some nice moments in it for sure, but the overall package just doesn't really deliver anything worthwhile in my opinion. It also doesn't help that not only is there not an ending, it barely feels like the story has even gotten started. That said though, it's actually not quite as bad as I thought it was gonna be. It is mature enough to actually handle some serious issues with at least a little bit of tact, and not just play everything up for laughs. That said though, they really do like trying to make you feel bad, even though it's pretty hard to actually feel bad for some of these characters. So yeah, that was Heavy. A fairly obscure 90s OVA. It definitely wasn't quite what I was expecting going into it, but it also didn't exactly blow me away. But what about you guys? Have you seen Heavy? Or maybe you've seen any other weird or obscure OVAs that you feel I should check out? Then leave it in the comments. Anyways, that's all for me. The Lupin video is still in production and should be out in March, hopefully. I wanted it done by this month, but it just wasn't meant to be. Oh well, better luck next time, me. Peace!